Chapter 6. Power. Paolo. Put your hands up.
Hans, Norge.
Paolo. What? Hans. I said no. Paolo. Why not? Hans. Because I don't want to. Paolo. But I've got a gun. Hans. I don't care. Paolo. That doesn't make any sense. Hans. Too bad. Martin McDonough. 7 Psychopaths. Power itself is a huge topic, but for the purposes of this book, we will look at 2 areas you will need to know in order to manipulate effectively. First is how to recognize who really has power and how to deal with them. Second is how people with power generally behave and why you should copy them. Power around you. Informal power. Formal power is the official hierarchy of any organization. There's probably a greasy, laminated flowchart of it somewhere in an office drawer indicating who gets to step on the neck of whom. You should note your position to give yourself a sense of who is technically above and below you, as the most effective ways to treat the 2 groups differ markedly. But don't stop there. Of more importance is informal power. Who gets the best assignments? Who are their confidants? Allies? Who sits in closed-door meetings? Who goes out for lunch or drinks together? Their formal position makes no difference. Those who are in the meeting have power. For example, a Harvard MBA may be on board to satisfy the client's sense of propriety, but the favorite secretary actually understands what these clients need and is more valued by the CEO. You should treat all these people as if they have the same power level as the person who relies on them. If you disrespect them, you will quickly find yourself in trouble. An early warning sign. If everyone around you seems to be doing things together which you're not invited to, you have offended someone, and unless you're in the self-sabotaging habit of messing with your boss, it's probably someone with informal power. Wolves isolate a deer before killing it. Your coworkers are doing this to you. You are in trouble, and your only courses of action are to transfer immediately or make things right with the informal power player. Other forms of indirect power to keep an eye out for are legacy, kinship, brotherhoods, and club affiliations. It's worth your time to pinpoint the power positions of your coworkers regardless of title and be honest with yourself about your position relative to them. And remember, they're not necessarily going to be advertising their position. As Margaret Thatcher said, power is like being a lady. If you have to tell people you are, you aren't. You need to look for it. From there, you should modify your general tone depending on their position. More powerful, and you need them. These people are important. Get their attention and create an alliance. You'll want to make yourself useful and make them look good. More powerful, and you don't need them. Avoid them as much as possible and work hard to undermine them. Help is necessary, but also openly acknowledge their flaws and weaknesses to others. Less powerful, but you need them. Let them in on little secrets and make them feel important. It's good to build an alliance whenever possible. You never know who's going to get promoted. Less powerful, and you don't need them. You can ignore them, but be careful when dismissing people you assume have no power. Remember the proverb, little pitchers have big ears. You always need more people than you think, and you can never be sure where a person is going or who they are talking to. Use this information to remind yourself how to behave with each person as the need arises. The basic strategy is to pay as little attention to those you don't need while working for those you do. But at the same time, keep as many people on your side as possible.
The geography of power. The corner office may sound like an 80s cliche, but geographic power designations are very real and age-old phenomena. Where you sit in the company plan, at a restaurant, inside your office, or around the conference table really does have a tangible effect on your perceived power or how a proposal will be received. Mafia dons are not the only ones to worry about getting shot from behind. Almost everyone feels vulnerable when their back is to the door. Spatial intimidation has psychological effects on your opponent. Keep this in mind as you position yourself to exude maximum power. Sit in the higher chair, closer to the boss, and literally look down on everyone else. Get attention. To secure a promotion, you need to attract positive notice from your bosses. But a classic problem with powerful people is getting them to pay attention to you. To do that effectively is not to tell them how great they are, they already know that, but how you can help them become even more great. According to psychologist Heidi Grant Halverson, it's not so much that they think they are better than you as it is they simply do not think about you at all. To really get their attention, You'll need to let them know how you can help facilitate their continuing, increasing awesomeness. If you can make them feel their power is totally justified and essential, and you are helping them wield it, they will pay attention. An opportune time for attracting attention is during activities where the power player is focused on an interpersonal task like brainstorming or team building. The powerful are more likely to pay attention to you at this time. So suck it up and volunteer for those awful focus groups and do your best to cast yourself as instrumental in achieving positive results. Because it is so difficult to get those in power to pay attention to you, make sure to avoid becoming the center of negative attention at all costs. Never deliver bad news. Get someone else to do it. Never volunteer to accept blame. Nothing is ever your fault. The problem is never you. Always someone else. Stick to this, always. And finally, before sticking your neck out to do something unusual, think twice. The adage, "no good deed goes unpunished," has taken root for a reason.
Get credit. Don't assume that just because you are doing a good job your superiors are aware of it. Remember, they aren't paying attention to you unless they have to. Highlight the complicated details involved in your work to make sure people understand you are busy. Learn to call attention to a result skillfully achieved and take as much credit as possible regardless of whether it's your work or not. Otherwise, no one will be impressed. Don't just think because a job is well done you will be recognized for it. People, especially those more powerful than you, don't think like this, and they are prone to absorb unclaimed praise into themselves, thinking, of course it's well done, my task force, i.e., you, always does a good job because they work for me and I am seriously stupendous. Learn to dramatize your work so observers can see the results in real time. Even if you have to devise some busy-looking yet utterly irrelevant make work if you have to. What is make work? Have you ever seen that group of like 9 construction workers standing around in an intersection on a double-time Sunday? Well, if you stare at them long enough with a hateful, "those are my tax dollars," look, the most sheepish one may well display a piece of make work by, say, measuring the width of a standard issue K-rail that happens to be sitting there, or haphazardly marking an X on the ground with fluorescent spray paint. While you can surely do better than this, the point is that any display of effort will make people more appreciative of the work you are doing. President Trump is a master of transforming any activity into a show. He could probably turn America's top data entry clerk into a reality hit. Social psychologist Irving Goffman says, "Those who have the time and talent to perform a task well may not have the time or talent to make it apparent that they are performing well." Don't let that be you. Look at Edison versus Tesla. Who invented the alternating current we use today? Tesla. Whose failed direct current led to the first, and gruesomely botched, electric chair execution? Edison. Even so, Edison gained control of the AC patent and plastered his name on every power station, light bulb, and invention he pried away from other people. Who died a forgotten, crazy, and penniless dude in a bum hotel who liked to feed pigeons? Tesla. Well, some claim he flew to Mars instead. And this happened even though he was a futurist idealistic genius and the first to envision our current wireless society. If you're lucky enough to have brilliance like Tesla, carve out some time to advertise and brag about yourself. Don't be a Tesla. Tip: the easiest way to move up the power structure is to find someone high up and get them to like you. Make them depend on you. Many people make the mistake of being jealous of a person moving quickly up through the ranks, but if you can get close instead, you can draft in his wake with less friction, like sticking close to a semi on the freeway.
Power behavior. The old saw says that power corrupts, and while you may well object to attaching the negative connotations of corrupts to power, the point is that the psychological and behavioral effects of power are immediate, intense, and self-perpetuating. Power is important. You should know how it is routinely expressed so you can react properly and present yourself as powerfully as possible. As with confidence, acting powerful cannot be overrated. Act powerful and people will believe you. Being a dick. Countless studies have found that people given even a tiny increase in power immediately become more of a dick. They start talking more, taking what they want for themselves, ignoring what other people say or want, ignoring how less powerful people react to their behavior, acting more rudely, and generally treating any situation or person as a means for satisfying their own needs. The research shows that acting like this also makes people believe you actually are more powerful. Furthermore, the more powerful you get, the more powerful you act. It's a self-perpetuating, self-fulfilling dick wag. What these studies tell us is that being a dick can be very effective. These studies also show that being put in positions of power blinds them to the fact that they are acting like. But this alleged obliviousness is just part of the story. The dicks may say they don't notice their own uptick in dickish behavior, but outside the lab, workplace field tests show dicks are highly aware upon whom they unleash their dickishness. 50 to 80% of nastiness is directed by superiors to their subordinates, with somewhat less between co-workers of roughly the same rank, 20% to 50%, and upward nastiness, where underlings take on their superiors, occurs in less than 1% of cases. So dicks are clearly aware of what they're doing. To most effectively harness the power of being a dick, these numbers are a good rule of thumb to keep in mind. If you're being a dick to a subordinate, no one will think it's particularly notable, just typical kiss-up, kick-down behavior. But if you are looking at a 1% situation, beware. You might be making a big mistake. The difference between dicks, assholes, jerks, and you. These aggressive types still suffer from moral reasoning and empathy. Do not confuse someone asserting their dominance or aggression with them being a sociopath. This is a common mistake, and one that is potentially energy draining for you. You're going to have to deal with enough bona fide sociopathic competitors along the way, so don't gum up your defensive apparatus with a bunch of mere dicks. Don't give them that much credit. They're still going to go back to their car and cry when no one's looking. Adam Grant found that many people rate themselves as givers in relationships while unlikely to call themselves the same at work. These hard-nosed executives can afford to turn into pussycats once they hit their front gate. You don't have that luxury.
Being sensitive. That said, it is also wise to think twice about when to be a dick. Astute superiors may well keep an eye on how you treat people with no power, seen by many as a strong indication of character. For example, Goethe wrote, "You can easily judge the character of a man by how he treats those who can do nothing for him. Try to resist the urge to kick down unless you need to target a specific threat, in which case it is best to isolate the person first and make sure no superiors can see you. At that point, have fun. Isolating is an incredibly useful tool when cutting to pieces someone who is climbing to power. When in doubt, isolate. Once you have some power, it can sometimes be effective and fun to stage a well-timed temper tantrum in full view to motivate your lazy lackeys. But never abandon your old, effective friends. Deprivation and isolation. True confessions. Power is all I have ever really cared about in my life. Physical power. The power of being desired or admired. Destructive power. Knowledge. Invisible influence. I like people. I like people so much that I want to touch them, mold them, or ruin them however I'd like. Not because I want to witness the results, necessarily, but simply because I want to exercise my power. M. E. Thomas, Confessions of a Sociopath. Territorial pissing. This won't surprise you. A study adeptly titled Territorial Defense in Parking Lots. Retaliation against waiting drivers shows people will take longer to leave a parking spot when someone is waiting for the spot than when no one is waiting. Some argue that a distraction factor needs to be taken into account in this case, but there is also evidence that men will still move more slowly, but to a lesser degree if the waiting car is a high-status vehicle. This means they're being more deferential to the higher-status person while still also being a dick. This is insanely petty, but it shows you the baseline of where people are at when they have no need to be bonded to the other person in any meaningful way. Think about road rage. People are perfectly willing to act out when there is no perceived consequence. Remember this if someone seems shocked by something you did. Shrug it off and say, "I didn't know anyone was looking," or, "You would have done the same thing in my situation."
Watch your mouth. Your vocabulary is an indicator of status. but not in ways you might suspect. According to language expert James W. Pennybaker in The Secret Life of Pronouns, you convey power not necessarily through a big impressive vocabulary, but rather with how you use small connecting words, such as we, you, to, for, but, and not, which account for less than 0.1% of your vocabulary, but make up almost 60% of the words you use. Pronouns are perhaps the most revealing of this group. For example, contrary to what most people think, high-status people tend to use we and you at high rates compared to lower-status individuals. And low-status individuals overuse I. The most common word in the English language is I, and overusing it can also signal that you are insecure, self-focused, and depressed. Conversely, the more powerful you are, the more likely you are to use articles and prepositions along with your big vocabulary. So, before you hit send, double-check your emails for excessive is and pronouns. Never send an email reply like, "I think I gave it to them," because is an extremely effective word you should employ often. People react strongly to the word regardless of whether or not the reason following it has any merit whatsoever. Just saying because enables you to cut in line at a 50% higher rate. Here is Ellen Langer's experiment. There's a line at the copier. You say, "Excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the Xerox?" 60% of people will let you cut in. If you say, "Excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the Xerox because I'm in a rush?" Then, 94% of people let you cut in. You assume the uptick in civic generosity to be because you have a valid, pressing reason. But that's not the case. If you say, "Excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the Xerox because I need to make copies?" 93% of people will still let you cut in even though your reason is totally vacuous. This is how Donald Trump replied when asked about who he's consulting with on serious foreign policy concerns. "I'm speaking with myself, number one, because I have a very good brain and I've said a lot of things." Critics might call this empty rhetoric, but that's their problem. If it helps you, because it provides a positive outcome for you, it's not so empty, is it? Tip: in certain situations, casual swearing totally works as a symbol of dominance. Generalize. It helps diffuse the power of individual experience. Never and always are good words to strengthen just about any assertion. If you're going to say something totally false, state it confidently with these types of words, as in, "I always wash my hands after going to the bathroom." Conversely, qualifying words like probably are weak and useless, and you should strike them from your vocabulary immediately, and never, ever, qualify yourself. Short, direct statements are more easily understood and remembered. If you want to make a point, say it succinctly and directly. If you want to obscure a fact, use big words. As George Orwell said, the inflated style itself is a kind of euphemism. A mass of Latin words falls upon the facts like soft snow, blurring the outline and covering up all the details. The great enemy of clear language is insincerity. When there is a gap between one's real and one's declared aims, one turns as it were instinctively to long words and exhausted idioms, like a cuttlefish spurting out ink.
Your own power. Here are some fun final pieces of advice from the 80s book, Power. How to get it. How to use it. Don't ask for favors. Grant them willingly enough, but make sure there's no way of returning them. Act with impassive, but instinctive generosity. The busier you can make yourself, the more you can impose your schedule on other people, the more power you have. The guy who has the power is the one who walks in empty-handed. The ones with the attaché cases are spear carriers. The trappings of power may seem like silly, empty formalities, but do not disregard or shrug them off as stupid and pointless. They are extremely important. People don't want to waste their own time deciding who you are or whether they should risk their own reputation by vouching for you. Amassing power is difficult, but the first steps are simple and direct. Make it your business to recognize all kinds of power. Get yourself noticed in a positive light by those in power. Get credit, take the title. Act powerful. People will believe you.